billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Dear students, in our previous lecture, we were discussing the types of sources or the categories of sources. When we go for the historical research, in order to arrive at some solution or some deduction, to use them towards management of crisis, we need to know the authentic information. In our last lecture, we had discussed two basic types of sources, that was primary sources and secondary sources. Today we'll continue with the same, and if you look towards the slide, the third type of sources, documents. Now, what do we really know by documents? By documents means if something had happened in the past, let's say it was an alliance or it was an agreement or it was a memorandum or a letter written by someone to another party, dictating, listing, or recording something. That's what we call is a document. Remember that till today, what all this universe has gathered in all fields of life, it has mostly come through authentic documents. When virtually there was no developed language, the old kings and people, they used various methods to communicate with each other. And that communication was sometimes through some stamps, sometimes through some figures, diagrams, symbols, and your alphabets are also symbols. And from there, the researchers have traced that history and found many things as to how they would communicate, how would they talk to each other, how would they negotiate, how would they come across and talk to each other. So that's what we call is a document. For example, if we find the original paper of Treaty of Hudaybiyah, the first ever written alliance in the history of humankind, we'll call it a document. That document reveals a lot to you. But again, you have to be sure that the document is genuine, it's true, it's not fake, it's not fabricated, and it has not been prepared by design by someone to mislead the others. There are many fake documents also. I'll just quote one small example from the history. Wars always bring very severe crisis. War is one thing that hits very negatively, very ruthlessly every walk of life. And when the war goes on, the adversaries or the opponents or the actors or the participants, their only interest is to achieve victory. and to emerge victorious, they do lot of things. I'm just giving you example of a false document. In the Second World War, to mislead the Allies, the Germans prepared a fake plan, and that document was put in the pocket of a military officer whose dead body was found from ashore. साहिल से उसकी लाश Allies के हाथ में आ गई, where they were launching their attack or aggression. और जब उस डेड कैप्टन की उन्होंने तलाशी ली यूनिफॉर्म की, उसमें से एक डॉक्यूमेंट निकला जिस पे जर्मनी का वॉर प्लान लिखा हुआ था. But that was not the real war plan. It was a fabricated and fake plan just to deceive the enemy, just to mislead the enemy. And it did achieve its purposes. So don't think that any document which comes across and you go through it, you don't have to believe it blindly. Today, we are blessed with the latest scientific devices, even to find out the age of the paper, how old a paper is, writing on that, for example. It's a very simple thing that if you find a document of 17th century and it's written with a pointer or a ballpoint, very comfortably and straightway, you should question the document, because in 17th century there was no ballpoint, there was no fine-tipped pointer. So how come this kind of pen or writing material has been used? So that means the document is fake. But the importance of documents cannot be overlooked, cannot be minimized. दस्तावेज़ात जिनको हम कहते हैं, उनकी अपनी अहमियत होती है. In those documents, I'll give another example. To spread Islam and to conduct diplomacy or international relations, our Prophet, peace be upon him, he wrote many letters to many rulers of the world at that time. Those letters have been found and they have been testified also. And from there, we get tremendous guidance and information about that society, about his times, about the approach which they had towards the others, dealing with the adversaries, dealing with the non-Muslims, extending the invitation of Islam, and being very, very positive, being very humanistic, and using the best tool to conduct the international relations. This is as far as the documents are concerned, and documents can be in many shapes. Well, I'm sure you must have got now a fair idea about the documents. Let's go to the next source. The next source with us is Numerical Records. Now, what do we really mean by numerical records? If you remember, we had studied collection of data, figures, आदाद शुमार जिसको आप कहते हैं, कि किसी भी क्राइसिस के हल के लिए बहुत सारी ऐसी चीज़ें हैं जो आपके काम आ सकती हैं, और उनमें डेटा या आदाद शुमार बड़ी अहमियत के हामिल हैं. So how can we get these numerical figures? If you look towards the slide, numerical records, numerical or quantitative records can be considered either on a separate type of source or as a subcategory of documents. ये देखें, इसको आप दो सूरतों में इस्तेमाल भी कर सकते हैं और समझ भी सकते हैं. There is no hard and fast rule. You may call it part of document. They can be part of document. For example, there is some document and things have been explained in that, and at the end there's an annexure or there's an attachment which gives the figures. So that would be numerical record. इसकी बहुत सादा सी एग्जांपल आपको दूंगा. It may not be in your knowledge and you may be knowing it as well. Both the chances. If you want to know the history and certain figures and certain systems and geographic situation of various places of Pakistan, there are records called the gazetteers. What's gazetteer? A gazetteer is a document that was prepared from the records maintained by the English government. जब अंग्रेज यहाँ पे बर-ए-सगीर में हुक्मरान थे, तो उन्होंने एक सिस्टम रखा हुआ था जिसमें हर एरिया की हर लिहाज से खुसूसियात मौजूद थी. एंड रिमेंबर, these things are the ones, the local environment, the local population, the local phenomena, the local resources which contribute towards crisis and which also contribute towards management of crisis. तो उन्होंने हर जगह पे एरिया वाइज ये रिकॉर्ड्स मेंटेन किए हुए थे कि यहाँ की पॉपुलेशन कितनी है, व्हाट्स द डेमोग्राफिक रेशो, ख़वातीन कितनी हैं, मर्द कितने हैं, उनकी परसेंटेज कितनी है, देन व्हाट काइंड ऑफ कल्टीवेशन कैन बी कैरिड आउट, व्हाट काइंड ऑफ एनिमल्स कैन बी brought up in a farm, what kind of business could be done in the area, क्या ऐसी वहाँ पे ग्रोथ थी जिसको दूसरे शहरों में या दूसरे ममालिक में भेजा जा सकता था और उससे तजारत की जा सकती थी, ट्रेड की जा सकती थी. अब भी ये सारे डॉक्यूमेंट हमारे पास पब्लिश्ड फॉर्म में मौजूद हैं. एंड आई विल एडवाइज यू that if you are carrying out research in order to bring out some results for the future, you should try to lay your hands on the gazetteer. Now the gazetteers have been published separately for every district. आप जिस एरिया में काम करना चाह रहे हैं और उसके बारे में न्यूमेरिकल या हिस्टोरिकल मालूमात हासिल करना चाह रहे हैं, आप उसका गजेटियर बाज़ार से भी ख़रीद सकते हैं. और if you have nearest library, you can lay your hands on. It's even available now on the net also. Certain places, not all the places, but most of the places. और हमारे पास इन न्यूमेरिकल फिगर्स का क्या रेफरेंस होता है? Today, in your own area, you have a union council. Union council has got records of population. They've got also some other information that gives you numerical data. In fact, that's the basic source from where the figures are collected and ultimately culminated, accumulated, and calculated at district level, division level, and then provincial and national level. So, आपकी यूनियन काउंसिल में या आपकी टाउन कमेटी में ना सिर्फ ये कि पॉपुलेशन के बारे में इंफॉर्मेशन होती है, वहाँ ये भी रिकॉर्ड होता है कि इन सच एंड सच ईयर UNO carried out vaccination operation for some disease. बहुत सारे ऐसे मौके आते रहे हैं when at large वो मखसूस क्राइसिस में जब बड़ी सतह पे वबा फैल जाती थी तो कोई फॉरेन असिस्टेंस से and even after that now with the local assistance the government of Pakistan has established its own system to vaccinate the people. जैसे आप देखते हैं कि पोलियो के कतरे बच्चों को जो पिलाते हैं, इनका एक बाकायदा रिकॉर्ड अब हमारे हेल्थ डिपार्टमेंट के पास मौजूद है. ये चीज़ें अल्टीमेटली ये जो फिगर्स हैं या डेटास हैं वो आपको हेल्प करेंगे. बट वंस अगेन आई मस्ट वार्न यू, it's not sure that whoever maintained the data, he was very perfect on that, he was very regular, or it can be 100% true. It does have the room for doubt and room for problem anywhere and root. So don't believe the things right at the face value. I'm sure you know by now understand what's the numerical records. Today you can get the numerical records from the concerned departments. You have to know the figures about education. You have a proper ministry for that, a proper department for that. Same is the case with the health. Same is the case with the business. The Ministry of Industries, for example, development, banking, and commerce, and so many things. So now the things are much easier, but the oldest also I told you, and the latest also I've told you. This is a very good source to ensure that you get maximum possible data, which ultimately will contribute towards having better deductions. Let's see the next slide. Relics. A relic is any object whose physical or visual character can provide some information about the past. Given the examples, it may be furniture, artwork, clothing, buildings, monuments, or equipment. So you have seen two things in this slide. One is its physical character and its very appearance, which will give you some evidence or some very solid evidence about the past, since we are talking about the historical research and the history. Now it can be, as you have seen the examples, it can be artwork. Now artwork means some kind of statues maybe, some kind of paintings maybe. As interesting thing, when people of fine arts, they started searching for the beginning of the paintings, it was interesting to note that the first thing in the form of painting was found on the butt of a rifle, which was used by the Greeks before the Christ, and a person called Homer, he had engraved something on that wooden piece of the rifle or the gun या बंदूक, जो भी आप उसको कहना चाहें, तो कहते हैं जी कि वो पहला आर्ट वर्क है पेंटिंग के एतबार से. So at least we have reached somewhere. Maybe it was earlier than that, but that we know in Greece, in such and such era, this kind of art was prevalent. Also, will not go very far off, but if you just see Turkey and you see Pakistan and subcontinent, you find wonderful buildings, forts, canals, gardens, parks, etc. It gives tremendous information. It's very amazing that those buildings, being centuries old, they are still standing with their own majesty and dignity. And the ruthlessness of the weather, of the time, of the climatic conditions, and the human destruction has failed to damage them completely or eliminate them from the face of the earth. You see, there is a mention in the Holy Quran about the hanging gardens of the Babylon. Their relics are still present in that particular area of Iraq. Likewise, if you see the old Pharaoh's culture, you find tremendous things. What kind of furniture did they use? For example, another thing which is more interesting and more important, how did they preserve their mummies? And how was that whole building prepared where the temperature remains the same, whether it is summer or it's winter? So there must be crises which must have been overcome by using the mind and the resources prevalent at that time, and they saved themselves from those calamities which could damage them. That's the history. And from there, if we keep digging the improvement till today, and also keep watching the things, your own area, the great Islamic Republic of Pakistan, by the grace of God, has the oldest relics in the history of the world. If you go and watch, and I advise you, you must go and see Harappa. What all you will find over there, see that. You go to Texla and see the things of Alexander's time, and there will be no aspect of life that has not been touched. Weights and measures are there, ornaments are there, writing materials are there, fighting equipment is there, swords are there, hunting things are there, artwork is there, and beads are there, women wear is there, men's wear is there, armies and soldiers. If you really go through that whole stuff, one thinks for a while, after visiting the whole thing, that man has hardly developed or progressed in any field of life other than the fast speed of life and creating more and more poisonous things, more and more threats for the human being. So, no need to go into more details. That much you must remember, that buildings also give you a lot. You see your own forts. They have a lot of carving. They have different flowers, different style of art, bricks, and how to weld them together. And their designing is also wonderful. So these relics are a very big and living source for you. Yes, the mistakes, again, possibilities cannot be eliminated. But today, you've got ultra-modern laboratories. How can you test them, find out their composition, the components, find out their age or era, and even the motive and cause as to why was that kind of material prepared and used at that time. There must be some reason behind it. आज इतने ज़ल्ज़लों को, ever since those buildings have been created, they are recorded in the history. Many earthquakes, many floods, many storms, many severe, constant, continuous rains. But why those buildings have not been damaged? Whereas in the contemporary era, we construct the buildings with the most modern technology and the most modern map and material, but yet they succumb to the earthquakes, they succumb to the hazardous weather and inhospitable climatic conditions. Why not make use of those techniques that will manage your crisis? The example of the earthquake we have seen in our own lives. It's a very recent phenomenon, and what all debris it left for us, the human loss, and the crisis, the level of crisis that was created. It was classic, and that's a classic example of crisis in our history also. But if we go back, there are certain areas where the old buildings that were built long time ago, they were hardly damaged. Why it happened so? This is the aim of studying or carrying out research and going back to the history to manage the crisis, because it gives a lot of lessons to us for crisis management. So that's it. I'm sure you have got a fair idea about it as to what's the use and how can we make use of the relics, or how can we learn from the relics. The next point is summarizing information obtained from historical sources. We've talked enough about historical sources. Now remember that you have to reach a conclusion, but in the process of carrying out research, the draft management is itself a subject. You will have files and bundles of papers, maybe photocopies and files and this and that, or on your computer screen. So these sources, what all information you are getting, you have to put them in an order which can be easily understood and used at a later stage. Your datas may be separate. The information from the documents may be separate. The information from the primary sources may be separate, etc., etc. So that once you come to compare and collate and relate and derive the things out of it, it would be easier for you. That's as far as the information management was concerned. Let's see the next slide. It says the evaluation of historical sources. Now you see, this is also itself, as I have been touching it partially through my lecture, but remember, this is a separate thing and it must be recorded in your mind as a separate point. Evaluation of historical sources. Just look at the slide. It says, the researcher can never be sure about the genuineness and accuracy of historical sources. You see, although you have got the documents, you've got the books, you've seen the relics, you've seen everything, but never you are sure about it till the time you logically and scientifically analyze this evidence that you have collected. Don't have a blind faith or blind belief or blind trust in one source or the other, or for that matter, many. Each source has to be scientifically, systematically, logically evaluated and thoroughly screened, sifted, and then you have to include it in your research work. Let's see the next point on the slide. A memo may have been written by someone other than the person whose signature one finds on it. You see, there's a very simple example. हम ऑफिशियल कॉरेस्पॉन्डेंस में भी खत लिखने वाला कोई और होता है, टाइप करने वाला कोई और होता है, दस्तखत करने वाला कोई और होता है. So that doesn't convey the mind of the man who has signed that paper. Or it may have been signed on behalf of someone, and it may have been noted. So don't take it for granted that if it was the signatures of a very towering personality are there, the paper has, or the document has also been prepared by the same personality. It may not be really that way. Let's see the next point on the slide. It says, a letter may refer to events that did not occur or that occurred at a different time or in a different place. कोई भी आप हिस्ट्री में से खत उठा के देखते हैं जिसमें किसी खास वाक़या का तज़किरा किया होता है या कोई मखसूस हालात का तज़किरा किया होता है, तो ये फैज़ अहमद फैज़ साहब की ज़बान में यूं न था, मैंने फ़कत चाहा था यूं हो जाए. ये ज़रूरी नहीं कि ऐसा वाक़तन हुआ भी हो. अगर आपको उसका कोई और एविडेंस हिस्ट्री में मिलता है जो उसको कंफर्म करता है, तो देन यू शुड बिलीव इट. अदरवाइज द मैनी researchers have experienced that many fake letters or fake events have also been recorded in the history, which have been ultimately disproved and eliminated from the literature. Let's see the next point. A document may have been forged or information deliberately falsified. Right in the beginning, I had given you an example that it's not essential that whatever you are reading or is in your hand, that is 100% true. It may be a fabricated story. It may have been falsified by design. हिस्ट्री में, तारीख में एक और जो चीज़ चलती है जिसे हम नफ्सियाती जंग कहते हैं आज के दौर में, साइकोलॉजिकल वॉरफेयर. दिस हैज़ आल्सो गॉट वेरी ओल्ड हिस्ट्री. The rumors is the best part of it. The false literature. बहुत सारे ऐसे पैम्फलेट्स, बहुत सारी ऐसी छोटी छोटी किताबें पब्लिश करके वो एक हायर लेवल पे, मैसिव लेवल पे उनको फैला दिया जाता है ताकि लोगों तक वो पहुंच सकें और लोग उसको बिलीव कर लें. Whereas it's absolutely wrong and it's absolutely falsified information which is created by design to mislead the people of a particular age, era, sex, nation or adversary. Lihaza, don't think that everything which you are going through, it is true. There's a complete encyclopedia comprising the leaflets which were prepared for misleading the people or psychologically demoralizing them. And it's a huge, gigantic work. It's not from today, it's from centuries behind, but today it has assumed a very, very refined shape which is acceptable to most of the people because all the people are not experts in this field. So this is the job of the researcher, to bring out the truth. Let's see the slide and explore another field. There are certain questions for the researcher which he must raise. Key questions for a researcher. The key questions for a historical researcher are, it says, was this document really written by the supposed author? That is it genuine? We have talked about it. So this is the first question which must rise in your mind, that really it has been produced by the same person whose name this document bears, or someone else. Read the next question. It says, is the information contained in this document true? You must see whether this information is accurate or not. I'll elaborate it to a very small extent because it has been enough explained, and I'm sure by now you must be having a very clear idea about it. Just read this slide. It says the first question refers to what is known as external criticism, and the second to what is known as internal criticism. जिस किताब को या जिस डॉक्यूमेंट को भी आप पढ़ेंगे उसके अंदर से ही आपको बहुत सारे तजादात मिल जाएंगे. You will have lot of controversies, lot of differences, lot of disagreements, even within the matter if you're reading it carefully. Now that's known as internal criticism. External criticism is your own brain. You have to question whether this document is genuine or fabricated, or the name it bears, really has it been written by that person. You see, in the history, names of very big scholars have been used to just tell the people that this particular book or document has been written by such and such personality, whereas actually they were not the authors. The aim was to ensure the trust of the people in that fabricated book or in that fabricated document in order to mislead them and misinform them or disinform them. For this, in the historical research, you should know what's external and what's internal criticism. And only then you will be able to find out and sift out the correct information. Just go through this slide and it will tell you what external criticism is. It says, external criticism refers to the genuineness of any and all documents the researcher uses. Several questions come to mind in evaluating the genuineness of a historical source. Now, the questions are listed. Who wrote the document? For what purpose was the document written? When was the document written? Where was the document written? Under what condition was the document produced? See, once you ask yourself all these questions, many things will automatically get clarified, and you may as well eliminate many things. Well, as far as internal criticism is concerned, just look towards the slide and very briefly I'll explain it. You will understand it. It says, once researchers have satisfied themselves that a source document is genuine. Remember, you have satisfied yourself that the source which you have used is genuine, then they need to determine if the contents of the documents are accurate. This involves what's known as internal criticism. अगर ये साबित हो चुका है कि आपने जो कुछ पढ़ा, जो डॉक्यूमेंट था, वो ठीक था, और अगर वो ठीक था तो अब उसके अंदर जो कुछ दिया हुआ है वो क्या है? Is that also correct? Is that also right? The second point, look towards the slide. Both the accuracy of the information contained in a document and the truthfulness of the author need to be evaluated. ठीक है, वो सोर्स जेन्युइन था, लेकिन जो कुछ उसके अंदर लिखा हुआ है उसको उसी तरह से अभी भी आपने बिलीव नहीं करना, बल्कि सही तरीके से उसका तज्जिया करना है. And see the next point. It says, whereas external criticism has to do with the nature and authenticity of the document itself, internal criticism has to do with what the document says. Now, internal criticism की जो ये डिफरेंस बता रहे हैं कि अब जब आपने वो किताब पढ़ ली, ये एस्टेब्लिश हो गया कि वो ठीक थी, जेन्युइन थी, उसी शख्स ने लिखी थी जिसका नाम उसके ऊपर लिखा हुआ है, तो वहां तक बात ठीक हो गई. लेकिन अब जो कुछ उसने लिखा हुआ है, इज नॉट ए प्रॉफिट, हिज वर्ड इज नॉट ए डिवाइन वर्ड, ही इज ए ह्यूमन बीइंग, ही मे हैव सर्टेन टेंडेंसीज, ही मे हैव सर्टेन बायसेस. उनको आपने देखना है कि क्या उसकी इंसानी कमजोरियां किस हद तक उस डॉक्यूमेंट में मौजूद हैं, which need to be sifted away. Now let's talk about with regard to the contents of the document. These questions, dear students, are very, very important, because if you lose sight of these questions, then you're likely to go wrong. Let's look towards the slide. With regard to the contents of the document, जो डॉक्यूमेंट आप पढ़ रहे हैं या जो बुक आप पढ़ रहे हैं, अब उससे मुतल्लिका ये सवालात उठने चाहिए आपके जहन में. एंड व्हाट आर दीज क्वेश्चंस? फर्स्ट इट सेज, वाज द ऑथर प्रेजेंट एट द इवेंट व्हेन ही और शी इज डिस्क्राइबिंग? सो वेरी सिंपली, फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन विल आस्क आवरसेल्फ, the event which has been narrated, has the writer seen it with his own eyes, or has he experienced it as a participant? Was he present at that time in it or not? हो सकता है कि हम एक क्राइसिस को मैनेज करने के लिए अपना प्लान बना रहे हैं, लेकिन जिस शख्स ने वो डॉक्यूमेंट लिखा है, बहुत मुमकिन है कि वो खुद मौजूद ना हो और उसने सेकेंडरी सोर्सेज या सुनी सुनाई बातों की वजह से बहुत सी ऐसी चीज़ें लिख दी हों जो हमारे काम की नहीं हैं, बल्कि हमें मिसलीड कर सकती हैं. Let's see what should be the second question. Was the author a participant in or an observer of the events? जिसने जो भी लिखा है, क्या वो शख्स खुद उस चीज़ का हिस्सा था? For example, if a book has been written about the earthquake problems, crisis. Now the thing is, whether the person who has written the book, was he one of the people who are managing those crises? So he will be participant. Or he was just an observer and watching the things. That will be the second question. And even these things will have the gravity, their own gravity towards the authenticity of the document. See the next question. Was the author competent to describe the event? Now this we have talked earlier also. It's not everybody's job to see a thing, to see a phenomenon or see an event and describe it also very successfully in a worthwhile manner, to disseminate the information in a way which could be trusted and utilized by the future researchers. This capability is also given to very few people, and then, of course, that much hard work. You require an expertise to describe the events or the things. What could be the next question? Was the author emotionally involved in the event? Now, if you are emotionally involved in some event, then your own emotions are also speaking through that writing. लेकिन जहाँ आपके जज्बात एक मखसूस इवेंट या मसले के साथ शामिल हो जाते हैं, तो आप तरफदार हो जाते हैं. You become biased one way or the other, because emotional involvement means you will have some kind of sympathies towards one side or the other, and that is the job of the researcher, to find it out so that he reaches the unbiased research to manage the crises which are likely to occur the same way or which occurred at that time. See the next question. Did the author have any vested interest in the outcomes of the event? I reckon it's a very, very interesting question. अब यहाँ हमने पूछा है कि क्या जिस शख्स ने ये किताब लिखी है उसकी अपनी भी कोई मखसूस दिलचस्पी थी या उसका कोई मखसूस मुफाद था इसके पीछे जिसके लिए उसने इस किताब को लिखा. Now remember, the vested interest. What's the vested interest? The vested interest is many a times you want to throw the blame on the others and you want to quit yourself very honorably out of a situation for which you deserve the complete blame. Or somebody tells you to write and present something which is useful for him. It may be a business party, it may be a community, it may be a company, it may be a nation, it may be a country. Second World War or First World War or the business crisis or the business collapses or the crisis containing other types which you keep reading. If you collect 10 newspapers of one day and try to find out one news item in the 10 newspapers, you will find the difference. All newspapers will try to put that news or describe or present that news with a different, in a different way, probably with a different aim and keeping in view their own policy. Likewise, it would be applicable to the television screen or the internet. If you watch these, you know, the germs of crisis are there. The breeding of crisis starts from there. So there are also things that one day, any newspaper in the world, in the West it happens quite often, you give a story about somebody totally denying or maligning his personality, and the next day आप उसकी छोटी सी एक तरदीद शाया कर देते हैं. Now the question is कि जिसने पहले दिन वो तफसील से इतना पढ़ा, ये ज़रूरी नहीं कि अगले दिन वो उसी अखबार को उसी दिलचस्पी से पढ़ेगा और उस तरदीद को भी पढ़ेगा. So that is where the difference will come. Now this kind of thing has been done in many media means, at home, abroad, and it happens due to multi-dimensional reasons. ये vested interests होती हैं. There are people who are always either they are motivated for certain benefits or they are lured in presenting certain rosy pictures to write something on some topic which is not really genuine, which is not really truth. But the aim is to create some disinformation or some misinformation. And you quite often will read in such and such place, such and such huge personality has been maligned like this and this and this, and then the story will go and ultimately you'll find nothing has come out. So what all has been written on that, now is that justified? If you only restrict yourself to that much material, certainly you are not going to reach the correct and the good conclusions. So, dear students, just to sum up today's lecture, we have studied the sources on which we can bank, on which we can lay our hands on, which we can use in order to learn from the history for the benefit of future and present. And the sources we talked about, we said we have primary sources, we have secondary sources, we have documents, we have datas, we have the old numerical datas present in our records, we have relics, and we have many fictions and stories and myths, and even in the folk literature, etc. But whenever we go through a source or a book or a document, there are many a slip between the cup and the lip. We have to ask so many questions, being very honest, being very ruthless, being very unbiased, और वो हक़ाइक़ जो फिर आपके सामने आएंगे वो मौजूदा और मुस्तक़बिल में मुतवक्को बहरानों पर काबू पाने के लिए आपकी मदद करेंगे और आपके लिए बहुत सूदमंद होंगे. But if you go wrong right here, then I'm afraid we'll not be able to render justice to our aim and be good crisis managers. I'm sure you are now slowly and steadily being mentally prepared towards planning of crisis management. Inshallah, you will achieve your aim. That's all for today's lecture. Inshallah, we'll continue, not the same topic, but another very important lecture, inshallah. See you in next lecture. Till then, all my best wishes and Allah Hafiz.